You know that moment in a horror movie where you know the bad guy's about to jump out and you're sort of on tenterhooks? That's where I think the public mood is at the moment. So we asked people, how are you feeling about the budget? Pessimistic, optimistic? 70% say.
A lot of us who were really looking forward to the end of the last government, and I was certainly one of those people, are a little bit spooked by a lack of aspiration and an apparent misunderstanding of entrepreneurship. So I think the government's got itself into something of a trap.
That is just one businessman speaking about one business. But he may very well represent a looming problem for Labour if they get this budget wrong. Our businesses, our companies, are the very people that they're expecting to generate growth for this economy getting slightly turned off by what they're hearing.
And it's not just business. It seems that everyone in Britain is fearful about what the contents of Rachel Reeves' budget might be tomorrow. The great tradition of Budget Day is the Chancellor stands at the dispatch box with a glass of whiskey. But given the concern, maybe it's all of us that need a double scotch standing by. Welcome to the Newsagents. It's John.
It's Emily.
And later we'll be hearing from Lewis in Florida talking to early voters. Astonishing numbers of people have already voted in America ahead of polling day next week. That's to come.
But first we're going to talk the budget, because in less than 24 hours we will know what the Chancellor has got up her sleeve. And what we're hearing is levels of concern from pollsters that they're telling us they just haven't ever registered before. The ordinary voter who has seen this one coming at them down the tunnel for 4 months now and is really getting nervous. But we're going to start with the voice of business, because you'll remember when Rachel Reeves was trying to get elected, she kept telling us how important business was to turn the economy around. It was about putting growth into the economy. It wasn't about tax rises. It wasn't about cuts to public spending. It wasn't a return to austerity. They were going to do it all with growth. And of course, the world as one cheered and said, yes, of course, that's what we need. We need a fully fledged, growing, exciting entrepreneurial economy. But now the voice is coming out of that very community as starting to tell us, mostly off tape, but one today on tape, about the genuine concerns they have, that nobody around the Chancellor really understands business or what their needs are.
And of course, you can't have the Chancellor delivering growth to the UK economy. What the Chancellor can do is incentivise, is to make it feel worthwhile for an entrepreneur to try and make that extra effort to kind of build a company or build a great enterprise and then sell it and, for it to grow, and it grows the economy. You employ more people. And so people are looking to the Chancellor to do this. Yeah. And the one thing we have had apparently confirmed to us is that employers' national insurance contributions will go up. So the cost of doing business is going up. And people are saying, well, how can that possibly be an incentive towards growth? How is that possibly going to help feed the economy into booming, and so that we go up the league table where presently we languish near the bottom?
Yeah. So a little bit later, you'll be hearing from the pollster from More in Common, Luke Tryl, who tells us about the responses he's getting from ordinary voters and focus groups who are nervous about the budget in the way that he just simply hasn't seen before. But we're going to start by talking to an environmental entrepreneur, Brendan May. He founded a sustainability advisory firm called Robertsbridge. It advises companies all over the world. And he is somebody who, as you'll hear, he explains to us, he's not a diehard Tory. He's somebody who thought he would support Keir Starmer and Rachel Reeves in this new government, but finds that he's really underwhelmed by the kind of language and the kind of policies that are being dripped, leaked out to us.
Well, Brendan, thank you so much for joining us. It's very good to talk to you. To put it crudely, what is it about this budget that you want, and what is it that frightens the bejesus out of you?
Well, I think it's an interesting time. I mean, I think a lot of us who were really looking forward to the end of the last government, and I was certainly one of those people, are a little bit spooked by a lack of aspiration and an apparent misunderstanding of entrepreneurship. So I think the government's got itself into something of a trap where they see three groups of people, wealthy sort of silver surfers sitting there enjoying their stocks and shares accounts and then booking a cruise when their shares go up. And that's sort of unearned income and sort of passive income, if you like. Vast sort of rapacious corporations who don't pay enough tax. And then the so-called working people. And the working people are the kind of people who sort of aren't allowed to own anything, and they sort of trudge off to the factory at 8 o'clock every morning, and they come back, and they're sort of, it's all a very kind of fat public sector, rather statist image. And what it ignores, and I'm really surprised they've done this, is, if you like, the artery that feeds the beating heart of the British economy, which is small and medium-sized businesses who don't fit neatly into any of those categories. And it's worth remembering that 99%, I think it's even more than 99% of people who work in business in this country work in SMEs, which are businesses typically of between 0 and 50 employees. The reason I'm concerned about this in the world of environmentalism, where I operate, is we cannot do net zero without the private sector. And we keep being told this is all about growth and green growth and this vibrant, clean tech, new British economy. But there's not enough money in government to do that. They've already said that. So it's going to come from the private sector. So if you stifle the very bit of the British economy that ultimately is going to deliver the revolution that we need and to put us on a path to net zero, my fear is that entrepreneurship, that aspiration will go elsewhere and it will be exported. Right. And I must say, I don't come at this from some sort of neoliberal right-wing Kemi Badenoch type perspective. I'm the opposite. I am a paid up woke Remainer, as anyone who knows me will tell you. But I also run a business which I built up from nothing 15 years ago, and which now exports sustainability services all over the world. And I find myself slightly dumbfounded that there doesn't seem to be anybody in government who actually understands what running a small to medium-sized business is like, and the potential that these companies have to fuel the exact kind of growth that we keep being told that they want.
So what happened to the smoked salmon breakfasts? Because that was what we heard, wasn't it, for the past year, that Rachel Reeves was wooing business precisely because she knew about the importance of making people happy enough to stay and invest in this country. I mean, do you think it's a political decision, or do you think business never came to the table, or do you think the investment just isn't there, or do you think she just needs to raise the money too badly to care?
And by the way, I think raising the money, I'm all for that. I'm not saying that nobody should pay any tax and we shouldn't have good public services. I wasn't invited to any of the smoked salmon breakfasts, but again, I fear that the perception of business from people who've never worked in it is it's either kind of hedge funders and bankers in the City of London, or it's large overseas corporations who employ armies of accountants to dodge tax and clever loopholes and compliance. But most businesses in this country aren't like that at all. I can talk about my own experience. I gave up a well-paid job with a pension in a big firm to set up my own small firm. And for the first 2 or 3 years, I took a tiny salary. I took on all the risk. I ran it out of a tiny cottage in East Sussex. I built it. My co-founder and I then hired some consultants because we got critical mass. Those people were then all paying income tax, paying their own corporation tax, paying VAT. So gradually we built up this thing. And eventually I sold the company about 4 years ago to a bigger company called Stonehaven. And we got people in Jakarta, Singapore, Dubai, London. And to me, this is the kind of business we want, right? This is a sustainability focused service exporting British talent around the world. And I want there to be a lot more of those things. And the reason it's important for net zero is that Britain is a great hub for entrepreneurship and for skills in battery storage, in sustainable material. All of these things we need to have for the net zero economy. Yeah. What needs to happen is that the big companies like the Centricas, the Octopus, OVO, the giants are going to be acquiring these small businesses in order to deliver net zero. If you make that a fundamentally unattractive proposition for entrepreneurs, either because they're going to get taxed into oblivion on the gains that they've made building up these companies, or you're going to levy a lot of employer national insurance, which means they can't hire people or expand quickly enough. You're actually going to kill that.
Brendan, I was struck by something you said earlier on. I sort of scribbled it down, that business will go elsewhere. If you don't get what you want in this budget, do you think it is possible that entrepreneurs like yourself maybe think, well, Britain is a crap place to do business. I could set up in Singapore or wherever I happens to be. It will cost me a lot less. I'll make a lot more money, and life goes on.
Well, I mean, I don't think anyone would do that on one budget. And I'm not one of these sort of Andrew Lloyd Webber types that threatens to leave the country and then never leaves the country. But yes, of course, the net zero economy globally is a hugely competitive place, and it's going to need vast numbers of transactions. We need this kind of fluidity in the corporate sector, because we're going to be doing all these transactions as all these companies get bought and sold and traded. If there are more favourable countries in which to do that, of course, British talent will eventually drain out there. We've seen that happen before. And the thing I find peculiar is I keep hearing that the number one priority of this government is growth. Now, you don't get growth if you put the artery that feeds the beating heart of the economy in some sort of straitjacket. Now, this may be a one-off budget. They may be able to, if you like, slacken things nearer the end of the electoral cycle. But I think the thing that concerns me is it's the tonality, it's the climate that they are creating for business. And people who run small and medium-sized enterprises are quite nervous about it. It's not because we're all greedy. Put some more money on my income tax if you want. That's very different to an all-out assault on the actual vehicle that makes this growth possible in the first place.
Brendan May, thank you so much for being with us.
Brendan May put his thoughts on record for us, and actually it reflects many of the conversations that I've been having with people in the sort of world of business who actually were just too reluctant to speak to us on tape because they don't want to sound like, they're the rich fat cats who have got too much to moan about when they know that a lot of people are really suffering in this country. But I think the reason that those voices are important is because Labour's made such a big deal about that being the way out of the £22 billion black hole. We know about Rachel Reeves' wooing business. We know that she went out of her way to get these people on side. We know that was, if you like, the clear water between them and the Conservatives, that they, Boris Johnson famously said business, and Rachel Reeves said, I've got to get you back on side. So that's why this kind of matters.
And also, Brendan May does not step out of the business pages of the Daily Telegraph. I mean, he's not one of those people who is kind of saying, any rise in taxes, I'm leaving this country, Britain is going to the dogs, we've become a socialist republic, etc.
I hate paying workers.
Yeah, all that sort of stuff. I mean, he is not the bloke from Pimlico Plumbers. Let's just to be clear. He is someone who believes that taxes should go up, but he's obviously feeling that Labour are making a mistake in the way that they are framing this, and the damage that could be done to the economy. We'll see what Rachel Reeves does. But it looks like she, having spent an awful lot of energy and capital trying to win over business, there is a real risk of alienating them as well.
Yeah. And you'll be hearing from Luke Tryl in a moment. And what we've understood is that this level of concern just goes much wider than he's certainly encountered before, and that we've been aware of before. Most of the time, if you say to people, the budget's coming on Wednesday, they yawn at you, right? There's no interest. There's no excitement, but neither is there fear. And this time, I think there is.
Well, I think the sort of Halloween analogies about the budget have become a bit tortured. But if you were to look at public opinion, I would actually describe it as, that moment in a horror movie where the bad guy's about to jump out and you're sort of on tenterhooks. That's where I think the public mood is at the moment. So we asked people, how are you feeling about the budget? Pessimistic, optimistic. 70% say pessimistic. And we did a word cloud. We said, describe how you feel in your own words. And right in the middle is worried. In fact, 11% of people independently said worried. And you never get that for something like this, for a fiscal event like this. The messaging that this is going to be bad has clearly cut through. And what I can't work out is, does that mean they played a blinder in terms of expectations management? And when I do focus groups later this week, people say, it wasn't as bad as I thought. Or has the mood been set so low that people are inclined to interpret it as, oh God, this really is bad?
Is it just a long run-up? I mean, is that part of it? You know, you set the scene in the House of Horrors. It's almost like you've got the tracking shot coming up the stairs and a close-up of the shower curtain, right?
It's exactly that. It's the gap. And people, again, set in focus, people are really disengaged, being like, why did they leave such a big period of time between them? But it's also the one announcement people have really heard of so far that's cut through is winter fuel. And so people have heard winter fuel, don't really like the decision to limit it, and they think the budget is a lot more like that. And so that's kind of become defining for them.
Luke, you said I've never seen anything like it. You've never seen anything like it because of the degree of worry or the degree of awareness about the fiscal event that is coming, or is it both?
It's both. It's that people bring up the forthcoming budget spontaneously in focus.
So everyone's aware of it because people normally
this stuff sort
tune
of passes
out. It's boring. Budget is meant to be
by
equated with boring, right?
No, exactly. And it is people, and this is almost a direct quote. It was a woman who said to me, "For the first time in my life, I'm worried about what's coming in a budget," which is just a very odd place to be, right? You know, and I think particularly odd, given, you know, Starmer's rhetoric, which I think was the right rhetoric before the election, was about that politics that treads more lightly on your lives. I think the level of anticipation for this budget isn't quite there.
And do you see a correlating kind of loss of trust, belief? You know, we're going to make politics more straightforward, more honest, and yet we keep hearing about these sort of devious little tax rises that are going to come in where we're not quite sure how they've done it, but our pockets have been emptied.
Yeah, I mean, definitely, and this isn't, you know, unique to this government. I mean, it was interesting when Jeremy Hunt and Rishi Sunak did their NI cut. The prevailing mood was, but we know that in the small print they're just going to take it away from elsewhere. And, you know, one of my, you know, standard spiels at the moment is I think it is really difficult to over-exaggerate how cynical the public are at the moment. You know, we had some polling before the party conferences, which found that 31% of people think British democracy is working. And that's directly tied to the idea that nothing ever seems to get better. Yeah. And so when you ask, what does the government have to do? I would actually leave aside some of the, you know, I mean, the individual measures will matter and be popular or not. You know, they're going to want to avoid a pasty tax type situation. But it's more, they're going to have to convince people there's a destination here. That's what people want to hear. Because they say, we've had hard choices since the financial crisis. We're constantly told one more sacrifice, a little bit more. But we're never told what the good looks like and when we get there.
So Keir Starmer has tried to roll the ground by saying we had no choice. We've been left this £22 billion black hole. That was thanks to the 14 years of Conservative rule, all the rest of it. Do people believe that they don't have choices?
No. So people agree with the assessment the economy is in a bad way. Fewer than 1 in 10 think the public finances are in a good shape. Just 12% of people say public services are working well. You know, it's really low. But then interestingly, we asked, does Rachel Reeves have to either cut spending or increase taxes or some combination, or does she have other options? And interestingly, a majority still say they thought she had other options other than doing one of those two things. So it's interesting. They've set the expectations that things are going to be bad. I don't think they've quite landed the necessity of some of the decisions.
Well, maybe that's not such a stupid place to be. I mean, isn't everything pointing to more borrowing? I mean, isn't that the way you get public trust up, you improve public spending, and you don't tax people more? I mean, isn't that what's staring the government in the face right now?
Well, absolutely. And we asked about the proposed fiscal rule changes on investment, and it was basically met with a shrug in the focus groups. But I actually think a shrug is quite a good thing for something like that, because it means you can kind of get on with doing good stuff that people will like.
If you had to break one of your pledges to the public, not to increase taxes on national insurance or not to stick to your fiscal rule, you can imagine what the public's going to say, right?
Yeah. I mean, people aren't talking about the fiscal rule in the proverbial dog and duck.
Right.
I want to go back to pasty taxes.
Yeah, and bus fares.
And bus fares, because a single item that kind of in the great treasury modelling of the finances of the UK economy can seem like a kind of rounding error and insignificant and can blow up to be something huge. And what we've seen in the last day or so is about bus fares. And I guess that's one of those things that may seem like, in Treasury terms, is the smallest column on a spreadsheet, but for an awful lot of people really matters.
It does really matter. So if you look at the polling on the bus cap, and we polled on removing it rather than raising it to £3.
Just to explain, so it's gone from a £2 bus cap to a £3 bus cap. Yeah. So when I was growing up in Sheffield, every bus cost 2p. And we used to spend our weekends catching buses to places we'd never been before. I'm sorry, that is an honest admission. That's what I used to do as a teenager.
Lovely. This just sounds like something out of a Monty Python sketch. We went on buses
top
wherever we
bus,
could.
at the front, and we went everywhere because it cost 2p.
The really interesting thing is, as you might expect, the polling is against losing the £2 fare cap. But more than that, because people don't like losing anything, right? You might say. But the really interesting thing, there was a quote from one of our focus groups which really summed up why I think the fare cap is so politically dangerous. And it was a chap called Gary in Manchester who said, basically, the bus fare cap is one of the few things in politics that my mum has ever noticed, and it's made a real tangible difference. And she says she never talks about politics or praise politics, but that's made a real difference because it's made her life tangibly easier. And that's why I think it has the potential to be so dangerous, because you're taking away or raising something that people know, people have, they can see it in their day to day. And of course, you have the unfairness or the perceived unfairness that the cap in London is much lower. So, you've not only got the sense that you're putting it to £3, but I think it's £1.75, the bus fare cap in London. So it's almost like anti-levelling up.
Down, yeah.
I've got an old person's bus pass now, so I don't know how much it costs.
Do you use it?
Yeah.
Do you go on the bus?
Yeah, I go on buses and trains.
I mean, it is different, isn't it? Because if you live in London, you have 6 different ways of getting anywhere.
Yeah.
And if you don't, you can wait 2 hours for a bus. And that can be the difference between whether you actually do the thing that you want to do or you don't do it and stay at home.
Oh, totally. And then there is a wider issue, again, when we do focus groups outside of London, this sense of why is it fair that it's so easy for Londoners to get around and no one invests in us? I mean, the truth is, lots of people outside of London drive much more than anywhere else than in London, but it is seen as an unfairness, and so I do worry that this will be the sort of thing that they regret. And as you say, it's the sort of thing that, a bit like the winter fuel allowance, for
you can
sort of
touch
Treasury
it,
brain, it sounds like a good idea to do because we're only taking it off people not on pension credit, but it's very tangible. It's that £200 that people get in their bank account.
And still to come, Lewis is in Westchester County in Florida, talking to all those people who've been queuing up in the sunshine and the heat to vote early.
That was Lewis in Florida. And if you have an appetite to hear more things US, including the fallout from the Madison Square Garden's hate rally, concert...
I'd say catastrophe, actually.
Catastrophe.
In terms of PR terms.
Well, we're going to be discussing it on the Newsagents USA, coming right up. And just before we go, one Lewis Goodall has snuck into Mar-a-Lago to a press conference that Trump has been giving there this afternoon. And we're going to hear more from him on tomorrow's episode about just what went on in that ballroom.
Mr. Trump, why shouldn't we listen to John Kelly, Mr. Trump? He called you a fascist, sir. Why shouldn't we listen to him? Sir?
The Newsagents. This is a Global Player original podcast.